The normal type. A type that is known for doing nothing. That's really it. It's just chilling for the most part, non-reactive in its type matchups, has some usages here and there, was pretty good in Generation 1, but now it doesn't really bother anyone. I ran out of things to say for the intro, so let's take a closer look at normal, the type ignored by the numbers. Let's start by looking at the normal type properties to see what it has going for it. In terms of resistances and super effective advantages, it has none, which is bad. The only positive trait that the normal type has is being immune to ghost type attacks. However, it's a double-edged sword since it also can't affect ghost type Pokemon. It also gets resisted by the rock type and holds a weakness to fighting type attacks, which at the very least allows it to hold the record for least number of weaknesses by a singular type, tied with electric. In Generation 2, the normal type gets slightly worse with the introduction of steel, which becomes the second type that is able to resist normal type attacks. Overall, the normal type remains neutral when reacting with other types, which holds its own pros and cons, and allows it to hold the record for least amount of type interactions with only 5. The next closest was a 4-way tie between Dragon, Psychic, Ghost, and Electric, who all have a total of 10 type interactions. But let's see if this type has gotten better over the years, even though we already know that it's given awful early route Pokemon just to fill the Pokédex. Starting with Kanto, we see 22 normal type Pokemon. This is the most amount ever released in a singular generation, and on average, they are pretty bad for the most part, with normal type Pokemon in Kanto having an average base stat total of 382. When looking at just final stage normal type Pokemon from Kanto, their average is 442. This is the lowest across all regions, yet despite that, the normal type was seen viable competitively in the first generation. More on this later in the video. Then we get into Johto, giving us another 15 normal Pokemon. Outside a new evolution for Chansey, there wasn't anything too crazy, so the average base stat of normal type ended up at 392. We then reach Hoenn, which had statistically the weakest set of normal Pokemon. This generation gave us 18 normal types, with one of them being the stat behemoth Slacking. This Pokemon has the highest stat value out of any non-legendary or mythical Pokemon, although it's held back by its ability. But still, even with its whopping value of 670, the average base stat across all normal types in Hoenn reaches its lowest of all time at 372. Its reputation does get somewhat fixed in the Sinnoh region, however. This generation introduced 17 normal type Pokemon, including for the strongest Pokemon in terms of base stat total of non-megas or alternate forms, Arceus, with an insane value of 720, plus another legendary known as Regigigas, which causes the average base stat of normal type from Sinnoh to reach the highest we've seen thus far at 427. When looking at just final stage Pokemon, with the help of the mighty Arceus and powerful Regigigas, Sinnoh had the highest average of all time at 516. Of course, Regigigas isn't good for the first 5 turns, and Arceus can change to any type, but I'm just talking about stats right now. Anyways, let's continue on. We then reached the Unova region, which also introduced 17 normal type Pokemon. They on average weren't as strong as those from Sinnoh, however, leaving them with an average base stat value of 406. Then we get to Kalos, which is the first time that a single digit amount of normal type Pokemon were released, with a total of 8. This is tied for the fewest amount of normal type Pokemon in a singular generation. They were also pretty underwhelming as well, with them on average having a base stat of 382. This is also the second lowest average base stat across all types in Kalos, only being ahead of the Bug type, who had a truly awful set of Pokemon. Then we reach Alola, which gave us 12 normal types, who were fairly strong since they had a plethora of final stage Pokemon. This caused their average base stat to reach the highest we've seen thus far at 431. But it gets even higher in the following generation of Galar. This generation gave us 8 normal types, which is tied for the lowest amount. But since the total amount of Pokemon released in Galar was more than those released in Kalos, it also allows Galar to have the record for lowest concentration of normal type Pokemon, with only 8.3% of Pokemon from the Galar region being associated with a normal typing. But despite this low amount of Pokemon, most of them were fairly strong, leading to them having the highest average base stat across all regions at 446. Then we get into the final region of Paldea, which gave us 14 normal type Pokemon, who were alright compared to previous generations, having an average base stat of 416. However, compared to the rest of the types in Paldea, this is rather low, as it's expected to be much higher due to power creep. This causes normal to have the second lowest average base stat across all types in Paldea. Anyways, when adding all normal Pokemon together, it causes them to have on average a base stat of 403. When accounting for the 6 regional form Pokemon as well, this average is further reduced to 401. This is the second lowest across all types, only ahead of the dreadfully awful bug type. When looking at just final stage Pokemon, it still remains the type with the second lowest average at 478, with an even smaller margin between itself and the worst type, showing that stat-wise, the normal type is one of the worst options, although a bunch of these rodents are definitely weighing it down. As for its frequency, there is also a noticeable decline, and this decline isn't solely because there are less Pokemon, as back in Generation 1, 14.6% of all Pokemon were associated with the normal type, but now currently looking at all Pokemon, 12.8% of them have the normal typing. When counting the 6 regional forms as well, it makes 137 out of 1080, or 12.7% of all regular and regional form Pokemon associated with the normal typing. It's not a large decrease, but it's a reduction nonetheless, which isn't good since this typing isn't all that good anyways. So with all this being said, what playstyle does the normal type see itself in when it comes to battle? According to Pokemon database, they are ranked as being the type with the lowest average defense and special defense stat, and also has pretty low ranked attacking stats. This makes it absolutely horrible. Its only redeeming quality is its above average HP and average speed stat. The only role it can hope to rely on is some kind of wall due to its high health and the type having only one weakness. Outside of that, you would have to look deep to find normal doing anything of use. In fact, I'll list all normal type Pokemon who ever achieved a Smogon rating of OU or greater during any generation. In simple terms, strong Pokemon. Just know I will only be mentioning their most recent appearance. Arceus, currently and always in the Uber tier, Ursaluna Blood Moon form, and Terrapogos in Ubers for Generation 9. Blissey in OU for Generation 8, Mega Kangaskhan for Generation 7 Ubers, Mega Lopunny and Chansey for Generation 7 OU, Snorlax, Smeargle, and Togekiss by the way, all were in OU back in Generation 4, Miltank in OU for Generation 2, and Tauros in OU for Generation 1. So in the end, only 12 normal types in existence were ever temporarily deemed as good Pokemon, with Chansey, Blissey, Terrapagos, and Arceus being the only ones to achieve this ranking since the addition of the Fairy type, without an alternate or Mega form. But enough of that, let's see what move this type has to offer. Does it even have any that are useful? Well, hopefully it does, because look at the stat from Bulbapedia. The fighting type has the 4th most moves at 57. The grass type is ranked in 3rd with 62 moves, and psychic is ranked in 2nd with 79 moves. As for the normal type, it has more moves than the next 3 combined, all the way up at 202. And you don't need to be a Pokemon expert to realize that most of them are straight up awful, or status moves that can be used by non-normal type Pokemon anyways. But what about their real attack? In terms of physical move, their best normal type attack is Body Slam. It has 85 base power, 100 accuracy, and a 30% chance to inflict paralysis. This move is very nice if it wasn't for the fact that there were 200 plus normal moves, but whatever. Another physical normal move that is possibly better is Extreme Speed. However, unlike Body Slam, this move is very limited to the number of Pokemon that can learn it, most of which aren't even normal typed. Let's look at special moves. The best move here is the 100 accuracy, 90 base power Hyper Voice. This is essential to normal Pokemon, especially in double battles, since it can hit multiple enemies. Some normal Pokemon even have access to the better Boom Burst, although, like Extreme Speed, it's limited to a select few. But all in all, the normal type does have good moves, I think. It has 200 of them. Next, let's look at normal dual typing to see if it can become more interesting and allow itself to do better, or worse maybe. This part will be analyzed by comparing dual type normal Pokemon to those stated in Wolfie's video about all type combinations. In his video, the worst 3 types normal can be paired up with is Poison, Bug, and Ice. These combinations has only been seen one time across final stage normal Pokemon, meaning that this already bad typing isn't getting pushed further down with the results of dual typing. As for the best 3 type combination, we get Electric, Water, and Ghost. This combination has been seen 3 times, with the normal type meeting each requirement once. Unfortunately, despite being seen more often than bad typing, it's still underutilized, as the expected amount of each typing should be 2 if they were distributed evenly. However, Flying has a monopoly on normal dual typing, with them having a total of 12. Also, it needs to be noted that there exist more mono normal final stage Pokemon than final stage dual type normal Pokemon. So pretty much the normal type isn't getting that much support from outside sources for it to do well. But how does all of this come into play when we look at the competitive performance of normal type Pokemon? Is it let down since it doesn't really have anything special, or does it miraculously have some kind of usable niche? Just know, the following stats are from Pikalytics and was extracted on July 8th, 2025. Pokemon usages could have increased or decreased from when you are watching this video. As usual, we start with the Uber tier. Now, the normal type seems to do better than expected, with it having a total of 3 appearances in the top 25 for usage rate. Now, all of these are kind of Mickey Mouse for why it even has usages. Arceus is only used because it has the highest stat in the game, plus it has access to a stab extreme speed. Ditto doesn't even count as a normal type, since it will transform on the first turn into a non-normal type Pokemon anyways. As for Terrapagos, it's mainly used to Terra type into the Stellar type, which then causes it to be the only other Pokemon in the Uber tier with a 700 or higher base stat total, joining Arceus. So basically, the normal type in Uber doesn't count in my eyes. So now let's look at OU. When we yet again look at the top 25 for usage rate, this time we see a total of 0 normal type Pokemon. The highest ranked normal type Pokemon in OU is the 27th ranked Blissey, making it the only appearance for the normal type in the top 50 for usage rate in OU. Blissey itself is one of the best special walls in the entire game, but the lack of overall normal type shows that this type is just not worth using, since it hardly provides any benefits without a gimmick. But what if we head into doubles format? Does the situation change for normal in such circumstances? Looking at doubles OU, there are actually 3 normal type Pokemon in the top 25 for usage rate. Now Smeargle, like most of them, is just a gimmick Pokemon that can learn any moveset. As for the other 2, they are actually very useful with their abilities to entirely shut down priority moves. And by priority moves, I mainly just mean Fake Out, which is by far the best normal type attack in double battles, while given priority ahead of even extreme speed. In fact, even though there exists no normal Pokemon in the top 10 for OU doubles, there are 3 Pokemon who have Fake Out as their most used attack in this format, showing that if you have enough attacks, one is bound to do good. But how does normal perform in the grand stage of VGC? Looking at VGC set I stats, we see a total of 4 normal types in the top 25 for usage rate. 3 of these Pokemon I have already mentioned earlier, but we see a new face, and the most used normal Pokemon in VGC is Ursaluna. It is able to do well because it's able to deal an unreal amount of damage due to its Flame Orb Guts Facade combo, and unlike its pre-evolution of Ursaring, it can also use a secondary attack in Earthquake, just in case normal damage is being neutralized. But overall, even with all this, the normal type just isn't really seen as being dominant, well at least nowadays, but it was seen as one of the best types in Generation 1. So let's quickly look at the Kanto region and how normal type Pokemon were actually feared for once in their existence. Now Gen 1 competitive was in a time where there was nothing, synonymous to what the normal type is known for. Back in Generation 1, there were no natures, no abilities, no items, and 3 fewer types, alongside fewer moves and Pokemon. Not only this, but the format allowed a lot of leeway for normal to do well. Psychic was one of the most dominant type in this generation as well, as it had no counters outside of the awful bug type. This in turn causes the fighting type to have poor performances, which basically removes normal's only weakness, alongside Ghost having just 1 Pokemon, which means its ineffectiveness to Ghost types is almost never seen. Finally, only the Rock type is able to resist normal attacks, but this typing straight up stinks, so you rarely see them being used. This all allows 3 normal type Pokemon to reach a Smogon rating of OU. Chansey, Snorlax, and Tauros. Chansey and Snorlax are very bulky, that can take on a lot of hits. As for offense, that's both Snorlax again and Tauros. They are able to perform well with the combination of Body Slam and Earthquake, matched with their high attacking stats. Tauros was an absolute menace since it was fast. Since in Generation 1, critical chance were calculated based on the speed stat. So fast Pokemon not only got the first hit, but those hits are more likely to be critical. Paired up with a powerful stab Body Slam that could paralyze even electric types, then you can see why the normal type was actually seen as being good back in the days. But what do you guys think? Should Game Freak try harder to revitalize this typing like it was back in its glory days, or has all the new mechanics and changes over the years just become too much effort for the normal type to ever see any sort of relevance again, and continue to be the type ignored by the numbers.